We do have a smaller, intimate group, so we won't probably need to use roaming mics, but look forward to engaging in a meaningful conversation. So to go over the agenda, what I'd like to do is give you a background on the consolidated plan for the housing division for the city of Sioux Falls, some preliminary housing and community development needs survey results that we received prior to this event, and then again engage with you on a conversation and get your input around what you feel are the most important housing needs, identifying some solutions to housing, or maybe reacting to some of the preliminary results that we've had through a survey that we conducted. So just to give you a background on our consolidated plan, the City of Sioux Falls is a HUD designated entitlement community. The city receives Community to Block Grant, or CDBG funds, and Home Grant funds directly from the federal government or from HUD. To receive these funds, the city is required to do a 3 to 5 year consolidated plan, a 1 year annual plan, and an analysis of impediments to fair housing choice. To give you an idea of what are some of the eligible activities under that CDBG funding that we receive from the federal government, it allows for reconstruction and rehabilitation of homes or other property, down payment assistance, construction of community centers, parks, recreation facilities to serve special needs populations, construction of public facilities and improvements including streets and sidewalks, demolition of property in preparation for land use, code enforcement, provision of employment assistance, for example, employee training programs, provision of public service for special needs populations, and for the home dollars, they can be used for a range of affordable housing activities. So what does the City of Sioux Falls receive from HUD? Well, we receive about $1.5 million annually in federal funding between those two CDBG and home funds. Past activities that we have done with our funding include single-family rehabilitation, furnace replacement, emergency mobile home repair, tenant-based rental assistance, Bright Futures homelessness case management and assistance for persons that are homeless, neighborhood revitalization, home buyers assistance, Habitat for Humanity land acquisitions, accessibility modifications, and fair housing education and outreach. I would like to take the opportunity to tell you a little bit some more specifics about the current programs that we offer through the housing division with the City of Sioux Falls, starting with our neighborhood revitalization program. So this program strives to reverse the progression of deterioration in our city's older neighborhoods. It aims to provide more housing options to low-income buyers. Through this program, local and federal dollars are allocated to a nonprofit agency who we partner with, Affordable Housing Solutions, for the acquisition and development of vacant lots or lots that have dilapidated structures on them within core areas of Sioux Falls. Sites are then developed into affordable single-family homes, or if appropriate for the site, smaller twin home developments. Those homes, when created with federal funding, come with them a affordability time period that they need to remain affordable within that community. So depending on the amount of investment that we have invested in that property, that home will need to remain affordable for 5, 10, or 15 years, depending on that level of funding. Newly constructed homes are required to be owner-occupied and available to households with incomes at or below 80% of area median family income as established by Housing and Urban Development, or HUD. For our single-family rehabilitation program, this program is for low and moderate income residents who own a house within the Sioux Falls city limits and need financial assistance to pay for improvements and repairs to their home. Assistance is offered in the form of a no-interest deferred loan. To know whether you qualify for this program or not, you might ask yourself, do you meet income guidelines, and answer yes to the questions relating to that income. Do you own a single-family home? Is your home within the city limits of Sioux Falls? Have you owned and lived in that home for at least 1 year? Are your taxes, insurance, and mortgage payments current and up to date? Do you pay bills, loans, and other expenses on time, and is your home structurally sound? The kinds of repairs that you can make to your home under our single-family home rehab program include, but are not limited to, faulty plumbing, heating, and electrical systems, worn or leaking roofs, windows and doors, deteriorating steps and stairs, unserviceable floor covering, necessary painting, siding replacement, insulation and winterization, as well as ADA accessibility. In our rental rehabilitation program, the rental program is for owners of rental property within the Sioux Falls city limits that meet the requirements of the program. Property owners must be code compliant and in good standing with the city's Planning and Development Services Department to be eligible for this program. The property has to be located within the city limits, has to be registered on the rental registry with the city of Sioux Falls, needs to be current with mortgage payments, property taxes, insurance, and assessments, and be structurally sound. The types of repairs that can be made through our rental rehabilitation program include loans may be utilized for exterior or interior rehabilitation but not used for appliances. Exterior work covered, including roof, doors and windows, porches, steps, stairs, gutters, downspouts, siding, paint, insulation, foundation, driveway, and curb. Interior work covered include mechanical, electrical, plumbing, paint, wall repair, floor coverings, cabinetry, and insulation. For our emergency mobile home repair program, this program provides financial assistance to low and moderate income residents who own a mobile home within the Sioux Falls city limits and need financial assistance to maintain their homes in a decent, safe, and sanitary condition. The program offers up to $3,000 to any one mobile home during its lifetime. To know whether you qualify for this program, you might ask yourself, do I meet the income guidelines? Do you own a mobile home, or is your mobile home within the Sioux Falls city limits? And have you owned and lived in your mobile home for at least 1 year? The types of repairs that can be made through our mobile home program include faulty heating systems, faulty electrical, faulty plumbing, and in some instances, siding. We currently have a survey that is live on our website. If you go to siouxfalls.org/housing survey, you can take that survey where it's going to ask pointed questions about different needs for housing in the city. That survey will take a little bit of time, but will be well worth it to get some very needed feedback in the development of our consolidated plan. So right now I want to share with you some of the results that we've already seen thus far. That survey will stay live on our website until the end of May. So I encourage you, if you have not taken part in that survey yet, to please do so after our conversation today. But in order to lead up to that and to understand some of that feedback we got, we need to talk about what is affordable housing. So the federal definition for affordability is housing costs are affordable if they do not exceed 30% of the household's gross monthly income. Costs would be defined as including basic utilities, mortgage insurance, HOA fees, and property taxes. Households paying greater than 30% for housing are considered to be cost burden. Households paying greater than 50% for households are considered severely cost burden. If you look at some income thresholds and target housing, all of the income levels on this slide are measured with the assumption that it's a family of 4. So extremely low income, that would be $26,000 per year or lower, is considered to be extremely low. Folks in this category would most likely qualify for public housing, Section 8, tenant-based rental assistance, transitional housing, or other deeply subsidized rentals. Folks that are categorized as very low would be in the income range between $26,000 to $43,000 per year at 30 to 50% of average area median income. And they may qualify for public housing, Section 8, rental tent credit development, and other rental products, shared equity and land trust for home ownership. In the low income category with an annual income range of $43,000 to $69,000, these folks are considered to be 50 to 80% of AMI. Generally, they live in privately provided rental housing, ownership with shared equity, land trust, or other deed-restricted properties, attached homes, and homes in affordable areas. When we consider the median to moderate income between $69,000 to $103,000 a year, these folks are considered to be 80 to 100% of AMI and typically live in privately provided rental housing, generally target for home ownership programs, and can generally buy without assistance in affordable areas. To look at Sioux Falls market over the last 17 years, the city has added about 52,000 residents, which is an average annual growth of 2.5% per year. Home values have increased faster than rents. The median rent back in 2000 was $521, and in 2017 was $781. This is an increase of 50%. Renters are paying $250 more per month in rent in 2017 than they were in 2000. Median home value was $101,000 in 2000 and has increased to around $194,000 in 2017. This is an increase of 91%. Homes have nearly doubled in value over the last 17 years. By comparison, median income increased by 20% for renters and 50% for homeowners. Cost burden affects 1 in 4 households in Sioux Falls. 22% of low-income renters face a housing cost burden that is greater than 30% of their income. 20% of our low-income renters face a housing cost burden that is greater than 50% of their income. When we look on the home ownership side, 24% of low-income owners face a housing cost burden that is greater than 30% of their income. And 11% of low-income owners face a housing cost burden that is greater than 50% of their income. So some preliminary findings off of that survey that I just told you about. One of the questions that we posed on that survey is, what are the top 5 greatest unmet housing needs in Sioux Falls according to the stakeholders taking that survey? The number 1 identified was housing for persons with serious mental illness. Second was housing for adults with criminal histories. Next came housing for low-income renters, housing for homeless families, and rounding out the top 5 were home ownership opportunities for low and moderate income residents. When we asked in their opinion, what is the single most significant housing challenge in Sioux Falls according to the stakeholders, an overwhelming majority, about half, said general affordability of housing. Next to that was underinvestment of government public sector. And 8% said not enough quality housing availability. The rest was a divided split of 4%, highlighting housing discrimination, ineffective code enforcement, neighborhood issues, types of housing available that don't fit the needs of the residents or desire of the residents, not enough housing in general, underinvestment from the private sector, and lack of rental housing at very low vacancy rates. When we asked, what are the top 5 greatest unmet community development needs in Sioux Falls, our preliminary findings are that of that top 5, mental health services, access to reliable and affordable public transportation, affordable child care, support services for low-income residents, and rounding out that top 5 were job training programs. prior to our 5:30 public hearing, we hosted today a housing summit where we invited panels up to talk about different sectors within housing. We had a poignant discussion about the rental housing market. We had a pointed discussion about single-family ownership market. And then we also started that day today with a discussion of individuals that are working in different areas in new ways for housing. If you were unable to attend our morning sessions, that session will be and is now being recorded live and will be available on the city's website for playback. The agenda packet that you have that was handed out to you today at today's evening session will guide you and be a great resource as you play back that summit today so that you can have a greater understanding of the individuals that were speaking during those panel discussions. What's important about our consolidated plan is that we gain feedback and input from the public, which is why we host this event. So now is the opportunity for all of you in attendance to share what are your thoughts. What are your concerns? What do you see are the biggest issues of Sioux Falls that we could address with some of the programming that I mentioned that we do with the city of Sioux Falls? And then what are some solutions to some of those housing concerns that you have? How can we work together, both public, private, nonprofit, to really stretch our federal dollars and to see how we can make a deeper impact? So at this time, if there's anybody that has a question, a comment, a solution, I give you the opportunity to speak and share. Yeah, and we'll use, even though I know that we're a very small group, for the purposes of recording, we will have you use a microphone just so that the public watching can pick that up. Don't all jump at once to speak. I know it's an intimidating group in here. I will do my best to answer them, and if not, if I can't answer them for you, then I will definitely follow up and give that information to you.
Thanks. What you mentioned when you were talking about the HUD housing, what is our Sioux Falls' 80% of medium income to apply for that? I'm just curious what the number to qualify for that program would be.
The annual income number to qualify for that?
Something 80% of what the median income is.
Sure, I actually do have those numbers if I can find it here. So this is information that is put out by HUD every year. And it depends on, the income depends on how many person home that you're looking at. So if you're talking one person that has 60 to 80% of median family income, the income is $48,300. If you're looking for a two-person income, then at 61 to 80% of MFI, it's $55,000. Three-person is $62,000. Four-person is just about $69,000. Five-person is $74,500. Six-person is $80,000. Seven-person is $85,500. And eight-person is $91,000.
Thank you. Perfect. Mm-hmm. And then I had another question for some of the programs that are kind of outlined here. You mentioned that they were available in core areas in Sioux Falls. Is that a specific? Is there an overlay of that area that apply to Sioux Falls, or is that core kind of a loose term?
I will tell you before I answer that question, if you would like a copy of those income ranges that I just went over with you, we do have copies of this for you. So if you'd like to take one, you absolutely can. So we'll provide that to you. But in talking of where does our programming go? With neighborhood revitalization, the one where we are going into the different neighborhoods, we are developing on undeveloped land within the core, or we're moving dilapidated, the core is usually downtown and surrounding. I do use the core loosely because if you look at our website and you see where some of the areas that we've gone in and we've created housing, they're kind of on the fringe maybe of what you might consider the core. So they're getting past Cliff and on over to the east side a little bit more. But still in neighborhoods that are central to Sioux Falls that are a little bit older. With the rest of our programs, they're really open to anyone within the city limits. When you look at our mobile home, our single-family rehab program, and our rental rehab program, they're not necessarily concentrated in one area. It's more about the need and the need of that individual and their income eligibility versus concentrating those dollars on an area. I would say the neighborhood revitalization program is the one program that we do operate that does kind of look to be in a general vicinity of the core. Does that answer your question? Yeah. Good. Thank you. Over here.
Observation and maybe solution. I think that there's some sort of communication incentivization gap here in that, like, today I didn't observe a lot of end users to any of these benefits attending. So somewhere along the line, and I know time of day and all these other things, but I think the city's got a big hurdle in overcoming prior methodologies of communicating that they care and giving solutions clearly. I don't envy your job at all, so thank you and good luck. But I think that we also have, I think an opportunity to do that is to sort of bring it to their scale, whether you do this event over and over and over in public libraries and in churches and in the places people feel comfortable already who need these services. They might be more apt to come down to that than they would to they may have never been on this property for any reason, and so they're not going to start with this event. So if you could bring it more at the street level, maybe think more like a missionary on that term. And then I think from the developer standpoint, like, I don't understand what would incentivize a local developer to care at all when the financial incentive to do what they've been doing is greater. Like, clearly there's a financial incentive to just build and sprawl and build in the $200,000 to $400,000 range. If you fly over Sioux Falls, every time it just gets bigger. And we all know all the participants, and we all know all the streets, and we all know how the whole thing works. But if this is truly at a crisis standpoint, at what point does the city get in and get really aggressive with changing the rules of the game or incentivizing or de-incentivizing the current behavior? Because in this town, the dollar's going to win. Like, I don't care how nice you are, how great the department is, or how many people want this, or it makes everybody feel warm and fuzzy. The ROI to do the current behavior is so in their favor. And they'll play a new game if they're incentivized to play a new game. And so what are your thoughts on that? What are the approaches? I don't know. I mean, I think there's zoning and there's tax and there's all sorts of things you can do to sort of incentivize or de-incentivize them. Mm-hmm. So how are you guys thinking about that?
Sure. Well, if I may, I'm going to address both aspects of the comments that you brought up. So the first aspect that I'm going to address is these public hearings and these meetings. And I couldn't agree with you more that while we had meaningful and engagement conversations throughout the day, we do really need to reach some of those end users of housing. I do believe that some of them were in attendance today and provided their feedback, but the bulk of who we need to talk to, we didn't get to talk to today. And I agree with you that it takes going to where they are and finding them in their most comfortable spot. We have traditionally in the past always held these events in the evening at the public library and have had very poor attendance. So we were trying to envision a new way to lift up the public hearings and draw attention to them. And the summit was a great way to have both events happening on the same day, but really lift up that topic of housing. But I think what it's going to take for us as a team is to go out where they live, to go to those community organizations, those neighborhood associations that they participate in, to go to their places of work. We have major employers here that employ hundreds of people like Smithfield and Gage Brothers and Sanford and Avera, and we can have an opportunity to set up shop and engage with them in a few moments when they're passing by on their break. Can we go to churches? Can we go to where they live to engage in that conversation so that we're not trying to get them to come to us, but we can actually go and have those conversations? And those are absolutely things that we look forward to developing and doing, because this housing summit was the beginning of the conversation around housing and development of our plan. And so we will look very near in the future how we can reach that end user of housing. Then to address that financial gap. Why would a developer want to build affordable housing when their profit margin is so small and when they can make more money in creating the larger homes that they are currently? And I think that that is a multifaceted, complex issue to dive into. But there are ways that we can do it, and that takes us looking at the development of housing, not just from a housing level, but looking at creation throughout the entire framework of the city, from the permits that they need to pull, from the infrastructure that they need to put in, what are the requirements in the codes, are there fees that we can dial back? So it's really going to look at it comprehensively across breaking that ground all the way to the finishes on where might we cut some costs, if we can, through some of those regulatory things through the city. But the other thing that we need to look at is what are other ways that we can incentivize those builders? Is it a tax credit that we can do? Are there other programs that we can leverage? Can we do public-private partnership? If we can help them acquire the land where they can charge a lot less than $20,000 per lot and not give that cost then down to the end user, could we then create more affordable housing if that cost is alleviated for them and they're not transferring it down to that consumer? So I think that there are ways and opportunities. Is it a challenge? Absolutely, because everybody wants to prosper. Even folks that are looking to live in these homes also want to prosper. Everybody wants to make money. But I do think that we have folks in our community that are ready to step up and engage and are willing to take less for a deeper impact. And I think we saw that today. And if you didn't get the opportunity to engage today, definitely do a playback. But then I believe on KSFY tonight we'll be airing Rich McCorris, one of our panelists who's been doing some development in Pettigrew Heights. His profit margins are small, but he's not really in it for the money that he's making. It's the impact that he's making. And I do believe that there are members of our community, much like Rich, that have a passion to create impact instead of profit, or with profit, but maybe taking a smaller profit than they might normally have in other housing projects. So I appreciate you addressing both of those, and I echo your same concerns and bringing that to light. And I think that there is opportunity, but it takes a willingness to sit down and have that conversation and really scratching out in detail what are those barriers and how can we lift those barriers to make it more attractive to get in with us and develop that housing. So I think the city has a part to do in that, and I think private industry has a part to do in that, and I think nonprofit has a part to play in that as well. So thank you. Yes.
I am really excited to have someone who is new and fresh in city planning and new and fresh in housing, because it gives us kind of a bit of an excitement to look towards the future and bring in new ideas, and just, even if they're old ideas that we've talked about, but in a new light with kind of new energy and voices behind them. So I am really interested in hearing when the plan comes out, what is the plan for 2030? And what's the plan for Sioux Falls for 2050? And be focused less on what developments we're building in the next year, but more on what do we want the city to look like, to have strong communities when it comes to year 2030. And I guess some of the solutions for that, or how I see some of that happening, is really investing in the density of our communities and less kind of this suburban sprawl. But if it is a sprawl, how can we be building these dense, multi-income, kind of multi-economic, socioeconomic diversity within these communities, building it in from the start. So if we are approving as a city plans for new subdivisions, show me where the $50,000 to $100,000 homes are. Show me where the $100,000 to $150,000 homes are. Show me, and up and so on. But not in a way that discriminates or puts these people in a certain place, or but how can we do that creatively to have mixed housing? And really building those strong communities, being able to provide them, if we're going to approve this new development, are we also providing or approving zoning for businesses that will then support these communities as well? So really hoping that there is a comprehensive plan, and I know you talked about this earlier, that it's so much more than just housing, that it's housing and city planning, it's housing and transportation. And so I would love for those to be taken into consideration when we do have this kind of overall vision for the future of our city.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much. And yeah, it is just more than looking at housing alone. We do have to look at housing and bringing in those other city departments into the discussion, because it does, play into that long-range planning when you're looking at the growth of Sioux Falls. And what's great about Sioux Falls is that the workforce isn't necessarily dense in one area. So workforce is spread out across our city, and we need to have housing that accommodates that workforce that is spread across our city, because they work all over the city. People don't just work in one specific area or another, and those are at all income levels where they're spread across the city. So as we plan going forward, we do need to keep that in mind, and we need to plan housing in the sprawl to accommodate that. And also when we look to our future, when we look to attract major employers, as we develop the downtown area and we look to maybe attract somebody that wants to build their headquarters here, what does that mean for housing, and how can we look ahead and plan for them and the workforce and all of those income levels that they're going to bring with that corporation and they're going to attract to our city? And what does housing look like when we're looking to do economic development even? So that takes us working in partnership, not only with city departments, but other organizations as well, like Forward Sioux Falls and the Sioux Falls Development Foundation, and really talking with them as far as what is on their horizon, who are they after, how can we find some data to see who's going to want to work for that company and what are they looking for in housing, so that we can really become that attractive package to the folks that we're hoping to attract to our city, and then continue to make the community that we live in strong and a safe, inviting place for all that live here. So thank you very much for lifting that up, and I appreciate your comments as it is helpful in developing our long-range planning.
I'm in a new seat, so I figured I could ask another question.
That works for me.
So I had a solution that may help alleviate some issues in the core areas, and it's eliminating parking minimums. They're a pretty much proven arbitrary rule that doesn't allow developers or landowners to use their land to the fullest extent. Instead, they have to build X amount of parking spots depending on what kind of business they own. And meanwhile, I mean, drive down Minnesota Avenue anytime that isn't 8 a.m. and 5 p.m., and you can look at the sea of empty parking lots and empty turnouts that, you know, what if they didn't have to build that? What if they could decide to add another story to their business? What if they could, and not only for commercial properties, I can also say for what if I wanted to add an accessory dwelling unit to the back of my house for extra income? I can't do that unless I provide one space, I believe is our new rule. Why? I mean, we have miles and miles of on-street parking that we maintain and have for a reason. So eliminating parking minimums would take away a regulation for developers and a cost that they have to maintain and then pass on to their purchasers. And it frees up people of any income level to earn more from the land that they own. So there's one, and I will say that's not a radical idea. Cities across the United States more and more are getting rid of their parking minimums. I mean, full out, Fargo a couple of years ago got rid of theirs. Let's follow their lead. That'd be one.
Great.
thought.
Well, thank you so much for bringing forward that solution. I definitely think that, we can take a look at our codes and our building requirements to see if there truly are those barriers and there's data behind them, and how can we change them to alleviate that barrier. And if we can be able to create more density because we don't have to have as many required parking spaces, then that's definitely something that we would take a look at. So thank you for offering up that solution. And we're fortunate as the housing division to be located within and next to planning, development, and zoning. So we were reconfigured to be under that umbrella within the city for these exact reasons, knowing that the long-range planning, code enforcement, and zone requirements play into housing. Go ahead.
So there's been, within the city, there's been a lot of talk of innovation. I had the pleasure of talking with Jason Reistover last week about their efforts in the transportation sector and what they're doing with the buses, and it's very, very interesting. And one thing that got me really excited was the fact that he was engaging in the concept of design thinking and human-centered design. And part of those processes is the act of iteration and prototyping and ideating and going to the crowd, going to the people and gathering information. But that, I feel like in the past, it's always been this sort of linear process in terms of projects, just in terms of, and this goes across the board of like just whether it be in a private or public industry, of you start at this point and then you get to this the final project and you're done and then it ends. But as we know, this challenge that we're talking about will continue. It's not going to end at any point. So I don't know if this is a question or a statement from me, but what are ways that with this particular, with housing, ways that we can have an iterative cycle of development and ideation? So like whether it be feedback sessions that are maybe a little more chaotic, and I say chaotic in the sense that there's people in a circle and we're throwing out ideas and we're putting sticky notes on the wall and we're just like, hey, yeah, that's a great idea, da 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 da. And there's a place and time for the summits. Those are always good, especially when you're dealing with, earlier there was a lot of people here. But where are those things that with innovation is messy. It's, if you go to a breakout session in Palo Alto, at any number of tech companies, it's a messy situation. So I guess where can the city allow for those types of brainstorming situations with the public in regards to housing? So anyway, sorry.
Yeah, no, that's very great, and thank you for highlighting what Jason has done with his team in transportation, because I think that's a good example of how you can use that format to really drive at some meaningful solutions to a problem that has been plaguing our city for some time, and if we don't provide a real solution, we'll fall over a financial cliff, and that's not going to be good for anybody, especially for housing, because we all know that housing is a core basic need of everybody. And in order to sustain your housing, you need to be able to get to work, and in order to get to work, you need to have some level of transportation. And in order to maintain your housing, you need to work, and if you can't get to work through transportation, you can't maintain your job. So we're fortunate that we had transportation go first in that process and be the quote-unquote guinea pig of that ideation process. And we thankfully have with us Allie, who's actually part of that innovation team. She's the innovation coordinator with Jason, and she will be helping us in that process going forward. So it's something that we will look at maybe doing something similar with housing. But I think there is some really great opportunity to do some of those same things. And even as we were talking in between sessions, while we were waiting for this one to start, we were already talking about ways that we can change up even next year's summit to spur some of that more interactive dialogue in a smaller group setting and then sharing that out to the rest of the group. So some of that thought process was already happening with the team just based off of what we saw today. But that doesn't mean that it's going to wait till next year's summit either. We will want to do some of those things before then, but just, looking out into next year, because we do hope this to be an annual event, is that we look for new ways to keep that engaging. We look for new ways for people to want to come. But we also want to, at the same time, be able to come back and say, this is what we heard at the 2019 Housing Summit. Welcome to the 2020. And these are some progress that we've made in some of the areas. So it's not just about talking about those ideas, offering up solutions, but it's also sharing back, what have we done? Let's celebrate what we've done together as a city, how we were able to bring those people together that we learned about through the summit, and then move it forward. And then we can highlight maybe some of that work that was done in between summits, just like what you're talking about. So thank you for bringing that forward. And I see Allie has grabbed the microphone, so Allie, to you.
Thanks for your question. I'll just add a couple of quick comments to that. So you're exactly right. So as part of our innovation process, we do try to keep our end user involved, and we think about it as human-centered design. And when it comes to housing, really, yes, our stakeholder is the resident, but we also work very closely with these nonprofits, with these businesses, so they're our stakeholders too. And I think that's a big part of what today was about. During our first sessions, we incorporated a technology called Slido. We know that some people aren't comfortable getting on a microphone and talking in front of a large group. So that's one way that we try to get inside of people's brains and kind of facilitate that engagement, as well as having these boards here where we're using different methods to kind of allow that open-ended conversation with these Post-its, but also just getting a sense of what people's priorities are. So just a couple of examples of how we've tried to use innovation with this sort of first stakeholder group, and I definitely think after today, we have some ideas of how we can continue to work more directly with that end user and get that human-centered design process involved.
Thanks, Allie, for being here today and for adding that as well and lifting that up. We're fortunate again to have the transportation team go before us, and we're looking to use some of the same things that they did for our programs too.
I'm on an organizing team for a startup week and startup weekends in the tech world. And I would encourage you to consider something like that for next year's housing, is that if you guys took more of an ecosystem builder approach instead of a consolidated information approach. Meaning, I think that if you said next year we want 20 of these events going on in 1 week. We want churches trying to solve the problem. We want the police department hosting an event. We want developers hosting it from their viewpoint. I think the idea that we can have a centralized that it can all come into a centralized location, we come up with a summary and then redeploy that back out is part of how we got here. I think that if there's an opportunity, how a startup week works in the tech world is there's an organizing team that activates 10 or 20 or 50 or 100 businesses or communities to do their own version of it to see what's illuminated there because they can best facilitate those discussions. And then that organizing team gathers that information, helps it be live and iterated online, helps people find that information from whatever viewpoint. I think there's an opportunity, if it's a true crisis, to not view it as what event can we have in a year, but how can we turn the whole week into something where there's so many versions of housing solutions, whether it's design competitions, get the architectural communities involved, get students from the universities involved, get neighborhoods coming up with their own solutions from neighborhood organizations, or just like the lady who said she's the mayor of that corner. There's a lot of citizen activists who probably could organize just a big event on their own because of their clout and reputation. I think there's a way to crowdsource so much more of this and give permission and give a blessing to this being somewhat citizen-led or street level, or not just being top-down government solution or top-down government partners. And I think you might be surprised, and I've been surprised organizing these type of things, at how many people want to come and participate in the sort of solutions that come about are things you would never consider, and that a group of people who are even service providers and government folks would never come up with. What neighbors can come up with is extraordinary. So maybe an idea would be to instead of like, let's do the housing summit a little bit better, I would say 10x it and say how can we have 10 events that are not even organized by us, but we just put them on the website and that's that version of it, and see if you can illuminate opportunities you would never uncover.
Sure. And if I may, I'm actually going to direct a question back at you, because I'm
right.
very intrigued in
Let's do this.
into that idea. And so what I'm going to ask of you is, I like the idea of, like you're saying, having those own groups that have a passion for housing, have a stake in that housing in their own community or where that lives, and maybe it's their church or wherever, to start that conversation. So how do you then, when you have a week full of events like that, how do you then draw out that meaningful information to roll it up into the bigger plan where we can comprehensively go forward, knowing out of those conversations, who are the willing partners and key players willing to come up through that process? How do you collect that information to roll up into a plan in your perspective?
Well, I think a couple things. One is, it doesn't all have to be collected and rolled up to a central group. I think that your job as a city government is to take the parts that you can act on and act on those. And so I think if there are different centers of influence, let's say you're a center of influence, maybe developers are center of influence, architects or pastors or whatever the groups are, I think they should have the freedom to find some solutions at their level and even come to the city and ask city for that blessing, or just do what's already allowed. Some things that are already allowed they don't even know about. I don't know that it all has to come up. I think that obviously in the tech world it's easy. You make a website and a Twitter handle and you say go, and the information is summarizing itself in real time. You don't have to get too much more complicated than that by just saying, here's our housing summit hashtag, and just like, Zach, you're organizing an event in All Saints, like just hashtag the bejeebers out of it so we can see. And if you find anything that you think could benefit the whole, please share that up. And it's become sort of a communal collective knowledge. I think you might be surprised at how eager people are to do that, because it empowers them to serve their neighbors and solve problems at their own level. And I think if the city just said, hey, we want you to be awesome at it, Zach, go and be awesome and do your version, and just as much information as you can provide us, we would be eager to hear any of it. We don't care if it's a PDF, Excel sheet, take pictures of whiteboards. We also want to learn what you learned. I think you could just show up at their events too. The police department does this really well when they, what's the neighborhood night? National Night Out. I mean, the chief of police goes to all of them. It's like 18 or something in one night. And so he shaking hands and eating hot dogs fast, but he's talking to all the stakeholders, and I think it works amazingly well. So I think that we could go out for coffee, but I think there's really simple ways
Sure.
to activate those folks and just reward the behavior you want to see, which is transparency and sharing. And if you do, then I know I just told Zach he would do all this for you, but so now he wants to speak. But I think there are ways to sort of activate it and allow that transparency to flow up where it doesn't feel so structured.
Great. Thanks for allowing me to project a question back at you. I appreciate that.
I was going to PS on that. They each can hold their own freeform, but I think if you even just provided, whatever groups with boards like this that you could measure at least one thing, because I would love to know what the folks at the St. Francis House think like these needs are versus the developers, and see where the dissonance is, because I think when you talk about accessible or affordable housing and the needs, they're going to be different for lots of people. And so if we're all talking about different needs, we're not going to arrive at the same solution. So even if you can get a kind of 10,000-foot view on where these different groups view the problems and see if there are places where they don't line up. But I had one small thing to add, but I wanted to respond to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great. Well, and part of the reason why I directed that question back at you as well is because part of why we are doing the public hearing of the summit is we are actually engaging in a process, a federal process, where we have to write a 3 to 5 plan of how we'll leverage and use our federal dollars. So that's why I was asking, if we do engage in a different way, we still need to have that roll-up data and information that we can really leverage and use to go into that consolidated plan. So that's why I was asking, I like that idea and that concept, but how do we then grab some of that information out to come up with that comprehensive plan?
Hello. If you give them the whiteboards, they'll just give them back to you at the end of the day.
Perfect. Great.
And if you want to incentivize it, then drop off coffee. Like, people aren't complicated. And if they see that the city is supporting, that the city understands their concerns, especially just showing up with whiteboards and markers and easels, you might be surprised at how eager a pastor or a police officer or a school principal is to like go to town doing it. And they would probably happily box it all up and drop it off at the end of the day because they think something's going to happen. And I've hosted a lot of these type of events that are very well attended here in Sioux Falls. What is amazing that happens is invariably there are people in the audience who can completely single-handedly solve the problem who step up and do. Because they looked in their fellow citizen's eye and saw the concern, and they say, I don't want this to continue anymore. And it's amazing that's happened in the local food markets, that's happened in the local music scene. It allows that sort of citizen to citizen level understanding. It brings them together, it creates community, and it offloads some of the burden of the city of finding all the solutions. I mean, God knows it's so complex. Again, I think it's doable, and I wouldn't overcomplicate it.
Thank you very much for that. I appreciate that. Yeah, we know as the city, we're not the one driver and we're not the one solution either. So it does take citizen participation. It takes public, private, nonprofit. It takes really everybody working together on housing, because housing is a core need of everybody. And so everybody's got to get involved because it's a basic need for everyone. So is there any other questions or comments to add to this conversation? You got the mic. You can go out again.
So, this will be my last one. A lot of I guess the things we've talked about and looked at are talking about building solutions and where. But I think a big part of this is what efforts are we taking to ensure our current stock of housing is kept and maintained, especially in our core. And you mentioned, our biggest employers. The top 10 employers are all in the core. They're all in these neighborhoods. Sanford Health, for all the amazing things they do and all the jobs and everything they do for the community, they've gutted that neighborhood in around them. And they've done it in, I think something like 130 single-family homes in 10 years on their campus, and what's there instead right now are blacktop parking lots. So when we talk about looking and hoping for, private, public partnerships, these businesses that we can, work together for this like common cause, I feel like the city needs to look at, what sort of relationship do we need to communicate with Sanford, with Avera, with all these kind of major institutions that employ people that, if we're talking about housing, you can't be removing housing and then replacing it on the outskirts. So what we need to kind of look at that as a real issue. And I'm just curious, I understand the city doesn't want to have to stand up to Sanford and their development plans. But, even pressure, they should be building parking ramps. They should be looking at expanding upwards, not outwards. and they're public about it. There's a quote in the Argus Leader from a few years ago where their development director kind of proudly exclaims, like, our goal is to get to Minnesota Avenue. What are the, hundreds of people who live in the line of Sanford think about that? Most of them probably haven't seen that quote. And that's alarming. And so we have this swath of the core of our city being just wiped out, surrounded by colleges too. What are we doing to ensure that ends?
Thanks for bringing that up. I appreciate that. And we do have large organizations within the core of our city that are looking to expand. Our hospital systems are looking to expand. Our school system is looking to expand, and they have also removed housing from our core. So we do have some major players that are, while they're major assets to our community and they provide much needed service and employ many of the people that live in these neighborhoods, they also do recognize the impact that they're having through their growth and expansion. And those are conversations that the city has had, is currently having, and will continue to have with them, that what is your plan to work alongside us and with us for the replacement of the housing that is getting removed. And we're not just talking to those corporate organizations that are expanding, we're talking to the school system as well, when they're looking to grow in the school too. So the city does recognize that as an issue and concern of the citizens, and it's something that we have been actively engaged in conversation with these organizations for, and will continue to do so. And if they are going to remove housing stock, where could we replace or move some of those homes? Because some of those homes that they look to remove are still quality homes that maybe if we could just move them to a different location or foundation, they still remain a great home within our community. So I appreciate you bringing that up and leveling that to the surface for conversation. And it's definitely something that we are engaging in. So thank you.